When you don't feel good enough for your partner, your friends, your job, life can feel like such a struggle. In this video, I'm going to be talking about what not feeling good enough looks like, what impact it can have on you and your mental health, and what to do about it. And I'll be sharing one of my favorite psychological strategies that I use in my own life and one that I teach my clients in my therapy work. Welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Liz White, a consultant, clinical psychologist, and OCD and anxiety specialist. If this video brings value to you, please consider subscribing and liking. Not feeling good enough is a very common human experience, and it's one that can have quite a significant impact on our well-being and our mental health. Now, there's one way of thinking about this idea of not feeling good enough that you may not have come across before, but it can be super helpful. So I want you to imagine that your life up to this point has been written up into a book, and all of the chapters describe all of your experiences across your life. So your friendships, your romantic relationships, your job, your study, your career, everything is in this book, organized into the different chapters of your life. Now, the next question is super important. So, what would the title of this book be? So, what title would best encapsulate your life so far? Now, if you are someone who struggles with low self-esteem, or perhaps you're even self-critical, it is likely that the title of your book will reflect this. So maybe the title of your book is something like the I'm unlovable story, or the I'm a bad person story, or maybe it's the I'm worthless story. And when you dig into these story titles, these negative self stories, what they have in common is that old chestnut, the I'm not good enough story. I'm not good enough to be a worthwhile or okay person. I'm not good enough to be someone who is lovable. Now, not feeling good enough can show up in multiple ways, whether it's a global feeling that you've had most of your life, perhaps because of a difficult or traumatic childhood, or it can be more contained to a particular part of your life, like your job and career, or perhaps being a parent. Or maybe not feeling good enough has been triggered by a particular life event, like losing your job or a relationship has broken down. And it can be quite subtle as well. It's almost like you have a felt sense that you're not good enough. Or it can be more obvious. So you may be highly self-critical and actually tell yourself that you're not good enough. But when you persistently don't feel good enough, then of course that's going to have a negative impact on your mood and how you feel about yourself. So your self-esteem gets impacted as well as your confidence, and it can lead to other feelings like feeling like an imposter in your job, for example, or perhaps you feel on the edge of your friendship group, never quite fitting in. So what could we do about it when we feel like not feeling good enough is getting in the way of living the life that we really want to live? Well, there is hope because you can do something about it. Now, first, you have to increase the awareness that you have that the not good enough story, that not good enough narrative that you hold is showing up. And how do you become aware? You name it. There is often something very powerful and transformative about naming the storyline that is showing up and dictating your actions and your decisions. Now, the second thing that I want you to try and take away from this video is that thoughts are not facts. So the headline or the storyline that you're buying into, that you're not good enough, is an internal narrative. It's a collection of thoughts and ideas and beliefs reduced down into the thought, I'm not good enough. But just because you think it doesn't make it true. Now, I wonder what your mind is making of what I'm saying here. Is it saying something like, I have actual evidence that I'm not a good enough person. I yelled at my kids this morning on the way to school. Or I cheated on my partner last year. Or I massively messed up at work. Or I was told by my parents repeatedly growing up that I wasn't good enough. And Our minds are really good at that, aren't they? They're really good at dredging up all of the really difficult, awful memories that really help us feel like we're not good enough and that the not good enough story is true. Now, another powerful thing to realize here is that even though your mind is giving you this story and is dredging up all of the evidence or so-called evidence that you're not good enough, you do not have to engage or get hooked by these ideas, beliefs, and thoughts. So, have you ever heard of that saying, looking at things through rose-tinted glasses? So that's where your perspective on something is really positive and optimistic, and you ignore the negative aspects of a situation. Well, with the not good enough story, it's the opposite. It's like you have dark tinted glasses on, and they color your perspective of the world and how you interact with it. So you are experiencing your life through that lens of not feeling good enough. And the first step is to realize that the glasses are there in the first place. Now, up to this point, you may not have realized this, but now you do. You are in a brilliant position to change it, to do something about it, this narrative that you have of yourself, to not engage or buy into that negative self-story that is really holding you back. So the next time you notice the not good enough story showing up, try and step back from it and see it for what it is. An unhelpful pattern of thoughts, ideas, and beliefs that makes you feel rubbish about yourself and blocks you from really living the life that you want to live. And once you have stepped back, you can ask yourself, well, okay, this storyline is showing up, this narrative is showing up. What action can I take that moves me towards the life that I want and helps me be the person that I want to be? Now, you may be thinking, gosh, this is a lot to remember. And the thing is that these are skills that you can learn. And a really good starting point is one of my favorite strategies called pause, breathe, notice, and name, coined by Russ Harris, who has written a lot of books on acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT for short. So whatever situation that you're in, and you can do this in your head or you can do it out loud if you prefer. First thing to do is to pause. So just stop what you're doing. Even if you're moving, just stop and maybe sit down if you can. So take a slow, long, deep breath. Really try and focus on that in breath, hold it for a beat, and then slowly exhale. This is your grounding breath. It's like pushing the reset button. Then notice what your mind is saying. What thoughts are showing up? And can you say something like, I notice that I am having the thought that I'm not good enough. And so you're stepping back from your busy mind, a mind that is bombarding you with negative self-talk, and you're observing your mind at work. And in doing so, you are taking the power out of these negative thoughts. And the final part of pause, breathe, notice, and name is name the story. There's the not good enough story again. Or here's the I'm worthless story. And going back to that book metaphor that I said earlier, when you're hooked by a negative self-story, it's as if in that moment you've taken the book off the shelf. You're avidly reading that story. You're immersed in it. And doing pause, breathe, notice, and name helps you realize that you've gotten a bit stuck in this very unhelpful narrative. Now, a bonus tip is to watch your tone. The tone of voice that you use with yourself is super, super important, because if you have a tendency to be self-critical, your tone is likely quite harsh or cold or dismissive. And so that pause, breathe, notice, name strategy isn't going to be as effective because it basically ends up being a tool that you beat yourself up with. So try and do that strategy with compassion, with kindness, using a kind, warm tone. And I talk a bit more about self-compassion in my recent video that I'll put on the end screen and link in the description. At the end of the day, it is really hard to feel this way about yourself. So using a warm tone is really key. And if you don't know what that means or what that looks like, maybe you've never experienced it before, then imagine talking to a friend who's going through a really tough time and needs some support. Because in that moment, you need support. You need to help yourself with this negative narrative. You need to help yourself change this narrative. And being harsh and unkind and critical of yourself is not going to help you in that process. So that brings us to the end of this episode. Do let me know in the comments, how does your not good enough story show up? And if you try the pause, breathe, notice, name strategy, let me know how you get on. Until next time.